Good morning, friends. Welcome. West Tennessee Dave here, live to you on Twitch at 6:33 this Tuesday morning. Yes, Tuesday morning. And come to you later on a VOD, either on Twitch or YouTube. Good to see you, whether you're here now, whether you're here later. You are always welcome. Good to see you this morning, Acebla. Good to see you this morning, Spacey. Thanks for coming in. Hope you guys are well. All right, today we are going to continue the story of Nehemiah. And we're going to jump around a little bit as we read this. There is some genealogy lines as we go through this part of the story, so we'll probably just skip over those. But just a quick recap. We started a couple days ago, we read the book of Ezra, which was the rebuilding of the temple. And as I said, Nehemiah is a contemporary. It's a word they use a lot when we talk about Bible with Ezra, meaning it's happening at the same time frame. So Nehemiah and Ezra are going out at the same time frame. So Ezra is rebuilding the temple, and Nehemiah is trying to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. And they're running into some opposition, as is often the case when you try to do something that is good in your life. Whatever that may be, you generally run into people that try to tear you down, try to stop you from doing good progress in your life. They'll just laugh at you or whatever else because they're enemies of yours or whatever. So how do you deal with those? That's a little bit of what we're reading about here in Nehemiah. So let's finish that journey today. Good morning, Sauce. Hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome. So let's get some water and let's fire away with the completion of the book of Nehemiah today. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies found out that I had finished rebuilding the wall and that no gaps remain, though we had not yet set up the doors in the gates. So Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet them at one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But I realized they were plotting to harm me, so I replied by sending them this message to them. I'm engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same reply. The 5th time, Sanballat's servant came with an open letter in his hand, and this is what it said. There is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me it is true, that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall. According to his report, you plan to be their king. He also reports that you have appointed prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim about you, look, there is a king in Judah. You can be very sure that this report will get back to the king, so I suggest that you come and talk it over with me. I replied, there is no truth in any part of your story. You are making up the whole thing. They were just trying to intimidate us, imagining that they could discourage us and stop the work. So I continued to work with even greater determination. Later, I went to visit Shemaiah, son of Delaiah and grandson of Mehetabel, who was confined to his home. He said, let us meet together inside the temple of God and bolt the door shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight. But I replied, should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple to save his life? No, I won't do it. I realized that God had not spoken to him, but that he had uttered this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. They were hoping to intimidate me and make me sin. Then they would be able to accuse and discredit me. Remember, oh my God, all the evil things that Tobiah and Sanballat have done. And remember Noadiah the prophet and all the prophets like her who have tried to intimidate me. So, on October 2nd, the wall was finished, just 52 days after we had begun. When our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. During those 52 days, many letters went back and forth between Tobiah and the nobles of Judah. Good morning, Eric. Hello. Welcome. For many in Judah had sworn allegiance to him because his father-in-law was Shechaniah son of Arah, and his son Jehoiada was married to the daughter of Meshullam, son of Berechiah. They kept telling me about Tobiah's good deeds, and they told him everything I said, and Tobiah kept sending threatening letters to intimidate me. After the wall was finished, and I had set up the doors and the gates, the gatekeepers, singers, and Levites were appointed. I gave the responsibility of governing Jerusalem to my brother Hanani, along with Hananiah, the commander of the fortress, for he was a faithful man who feared God more than most. I said to him, "Do not leave the gates open during the hottest part of the day, and even while the gatekeepers are on duty, have them shut and bar the doors. Appoint the residents of Jerusalem to act as guards, everyone on a regular watch. Some will serve as sentry posts, and some in front of their own homes." At that time the city was large and spacious, but the population was small, and none of the houses had been rebuilt. So my God gave me the idea to call together all the nobles and leaders of the city, along with the ordinary citizens, for registration. I found the genealogical record of those who had first returned to Judah. This is what was written there. All right, so here's the whole list. So we're going to just skip that. Another group returned at this time from the towns of Tel Mel, Tel Harsha, Karub, Adon, and Atmir. However, they could not prove that they or their families were descendants of Israel. This group included families of Deliah, Tobiah, and Nekoda, a total of 642 people. 3 families of priests, Hobiah, Hakazah, and Barzillai, also returned. This Barzillai had married a woman who was a descendant of Barzillai of Gilead, and he had taken her family name. They searched for their names in the genealogical records, but they were not found, so they were disqualified from serving as priests. The governor told them not to eat the priest's share of food from the sacrifices until a priest can consult the Lord about the matter by using the Urim and Thummim, the sacred lots. So a total of 42,360 people returned to Judah, in addition to 7,337 servants and 245 singers, both men and women. They took with them 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. Some of the family leaders gave gifts for the work. The governor gave to the treasury 1,000 gold coins, 50 gold basins, and 530 robes for the priest. The other leaders gave to the treasury a total of 20,000 gold coins and some 2,750 pounds of silver for the work. The rest of the people gave 20,000 gold coins and about 2,500 pounds of silver and 67 robes for the priest. So the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, and the temple servants, and some of the common people settled near Jerusalem. The rest of the people returned to their own towns throughout Israel. In October, when the Israelites had settled in their towns, all the people assembled with a unified purpose at the square just inside the water gate. They asked Ezra the scribe to bring out the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had given for Israel to obey. So on October 8th, Ezra the priest brought the book of the law before the assembly, which included the men and the women and all the children old enough to understand. He faced the square just inside the water gate from early morning until noon and read aloud to everyone who could understand. All the people listened closely to the book of the law. Ezra the scribe stood on a high wooden platform that had been made for the occasion. To his right stood Mattithiah, Shema, Ananiah, Uriah, Hilkiah, and Messiah. To his left stood Pedaiah, Mishael, Malchijah, Hashum, Hashbaddanah, Zechariah, and Meshullam. Ezra stood on the platform in full view of all the people. When they saw him open the book, they all rose to their feet. Then Ezra praised the Lord, the great God, and all the people chanted, "Amen, Amen." As they lifted their hands, then they bowed down and worshipped the Lord with their faces to the ground. The Levites, Jeshua, Bani, Sheriba, Jamin, Akub, Shabbatai, Hodiah, Mahasiah, Kalita, Azariah, Jozabad, Hanan, and Paleel, then instructed the people in the law while everyone remained in their places. They read the book of the law of God and clearly explained the meaning of what was being read, helping the people understand each passage. Then Nehemiah the governor, Ezra the priest and scribe, And the Levites who were interpreting for the people said to them, "Don't mourn or weep on such a day as this, for today is a sacred day before the Lord your God." For the people had all been weeping as they listened to the words of the law. And Nehemiah continued, "Go and celebrate with a feast of rich foods and sweet drinks, and share gifts of food with people who have nothing prepared. This is a sacred day before our Lord. Don't be dejected and sad, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." And the Levites too quieted the people and telling them, "Hush, don't weep, for this is a sacred day." So the people went away to eat and drink at a festive meal, to share gifts of food, and to celebrate with great joy because they had heard God's words and understood them. On October 9th, the family leaders of all the people gathered together with the priests and Levites, met with Ezra the scribe to go over the law in greater detail. As they studied the law, they discovered that the Lord had commanded through Moses that the Israelites should live in shelters during the festival to be held that month. He had said that a proclamation should be made throughout their towns and in Jerusalem, telling the people to go to the hills to get branches from wild olive, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees. They were to use these branches to make shelters in which they would live during the festival as prescribed in the law. Give me a second here, guys. Sorry, I had to blow my nose there. So the people went out and cut branches and used them to build shelters on the roofs of their houses, in the courtyards of God's temple, or in the squares just inside the water gate and the Ephraim gate. So everyone who had returned from captivity lived in these shelters during the festival, and they were all filled with great joy. The Israelites had not celebrated like this since the days of Joshua, son of Nun. Ezra read the book of the law of God on each of the 7 days of the festival. Then on the 8th day they held a solemn assembly as required by the law. On October 31st the people assembled again, and this time they fasted and dressed in burlap and sprinkled dust on their heads. Those of Israelite descent separated themselves from all foreigners as they confessed their own sins and the sins of their ancestors. They remained standing in place for 3 hours, while the book of the law of the Lord their God was read aloud to them. Then for 3 more hours they confessed their sins and worshipped the Lord their God. The Levites, Jeshua, Bani, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Buni, Sherebiah, Bani, and Kenani stood on the stairway of the Levites and cried out to the Lord their God with loud voices. Then the leaders of the Levites, Jeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Heshabaniah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, and Pethahiah, called out to the people, "Stand up and praise the Lord your God, for he lives from everlasting to everlasting." Then they prayed, "May your glorious name be praised. May it be exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are the Lord. You have made the skies and the heavens and all the stars. You made the earth and the seas and everything in them. You preserve them all, and the angels of heaven worship you. You are the Lord God, who chose Abram and brought him from Ur of the Chaldeans, and renamed him Abraham. When he had proved himself faithful, you made a covenant with him to give him and his descendants the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and Girgashites. And you have done what you promised, for you are always true to your word. You saw the misery of our ancestors in Egypt, and you heard their cries from beside the Red Sea. You displayed the miraculous signs and wonders against Pharaoh, his officials, and all his people, for you knew how arrogantly they were treating our ancestors. You have a glorious reputation that has never been forgotten. You divided the sea for your people so they could walk through on dry land. And then you hurled their enemies into the depths of the sea. They sank like stones beneath the mighty waters. You led our ancestors by a pillar of cloud during the day and by a pillar of fire at night so that they could find their way. You came down at Mount Sinai and spoke to them from heaven. You gave them regulations and instructions that were just and decrees and commands that were good. You instructed them concerning your holy Sabbath, and you commanded them through Moses your servant to obey all your commands, decrees, and instructions. You gave them bread from heaven when they were hungry, and water from the rock when they were thirsty. You commanded them to go and take possession of the land you had sworn to give them. But our ancestors were proud and stubborn, and they paid no attention to your commands. They refused to obey and did not remember the miracles you had done for them. Instead, they became stubborn and appointed a leader to take them back to their slavery in Egypt. But you are a God of forgiveness, gracious and merciful, slow to become angry, and rich in unfailing love. You did not abandon them, even when they made an idol shaped like a calf and said, "This is your God who brought you out of Egypt." They committed terrible blasphemies. But in your great mercy, you did not abandon them to die in the wilderness. The pillar of cloud still led them forward by day, and the pillar of fire showed them the way through the night. You sent your good spirit to instruct them, and you did not stop giving them manna from heaven or water for their thirst. For 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness, and they lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. Then you helped our ancestors conquer kingdoms and nations, and you placed your people in every corner of the land. They took over the land of King Shion of Heshbon and the land of King Og of Bashan. You made their descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and brought them into the land you had promised to their ancestors. They went in and took possession of the land. You subdued whole nations before them. Even the Canaanites who inhabited the land were powerless. Your people could deal with these nations and their kings as they pleased. Our ancestors captured fortified cities and fertile land. They took over houses full of good things, with cisterns already dug, and vineyards and olive groves and fruit trees in abundance. So they ate until they were full and grew fat and enjoyed themselves in all your blessings. But despite all this, they were disobedient and rebelled against you. They turned their backs on your law. They killed your prophets who warned them to return to you, and they committed terrible blasphemies. So you handed them over to their enemies who made them suffer. But in their time of trouble they cried to you, and you heard them from heaven. In your great mercy you sent them liberators who rescued them from their enemies. But as soon as they were at peace, your people again committed evil in your sight, and once more you let their enemies conquer them. Yet whenever your people turned and cried to you again for help, you listened once more from heaven. In your wonderful mercy you rescued them many times. You warned them to return to your law, but they became proud and obstinate and disobeyed your commands. They did not follow your regulations, by which people will find life if only they obey. They stubbornly turned their backs on you and refused to listen. In your love, you were patient with them for many years. You sent them your spirit, who warned them through the prophets, but still they wouldn't listen. So once again you allowed the peoples of the land to conquer them. But in your great mercy you did not destroy them or completely abandon them forever. What a gracious and merciful God you are. And now, our God, the great and mighty and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love, do not let all the hardships we have suffered seem insignificant to you. Great trouble has come upon us and upon our kings and leaders and priests and prophets and ancestors, all of your people from the days when the kings of Assyria first triumphed over us until now. Every time you punished us, you were being just. We have sinned greatly, and you gave us only what we deserved. Our kings, leaders, priests, and ancestors did not obey your law or listen to the warnings in your commands and laws. Even while they had their own kingdom, they did not serve you, though you showered your goodness on them. You gave them a large fertile land, but they refused to turn from their wickedness. So now today we are slaves in the land of plenty that you gave our ancestors for their enjoyment. We are slaves here in this good land. The lush produce of this land piles up in the hands of our kings, whom you have set over us because of our sins. They have power over us and our livestock. We serve them at their pleasure, and we are in great misery. The people responded, "In view of all this, we are making a solemn promise and putting it in writing. On this sealed documents are the names of our leaders and the Levites and the priests." All right, and so then all these people signed the document. Then the rest of the people, the priests, Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, and all who had separated themselves from the pagan people of the land, in order to obey the law of God, together with their wives, sons, daughters, and all who were old enough to understand, joined their leaders and bound themselves with an oath. They swore a curse on themselves if they failed to obey the law of God as issued by his servant Moses. They solemnly promised to carefully follow all the commands, regulations, and decrees of the Lord our God. We promise not to let our daughters marry the pagan people of the land, and not to let our sons marry their daughters. We also promise that if the people of the land should bring any merchandise or grain to be sold on the Sabbath or any other holy day, we will refuse to buy it. Every 7th year we will let our land rest, and we will cancel all debts owed to us. In addition, we promise to obey the command to pay the annual temple tax of 1/8 of an ounce of silver for the care of the temple of our God. This will provide for the bread of the presence, for the regular grain offerings and the burnt offerings, for the offerings on the Sabbaths, the new moon celebrations, and the annual festivals, for the holy offerings, and for the sin offerings to make atonement for Israel. It will provide for everything necessary for the work of the temple of our God. We have cast sacred lots to determine when, at regular times each year, the families of the priests, Levites, and the common people should bring wood to God's temple to be burned on the altar of the Lord our God, as is written in the law. We promise to bring the first part of every harvest to the Lord's temple year after year, whether it be a crop from the soil or from our fruit trees. We agree to give God our oldest sons and the firstborn of all our herds and flocks, as prescribed in the law. We will present them to the priests who minister in the temple of our God. We will store the produce in storerooms of the temple of our God. We will bring the best of our flour and other grain offerings, the best of our fruit, and the best of our new wine and olive oil. And we promise to bring the Levites 1/10 of everything our land produces, for it is the Levites who collect the tithes in all our rural towns. A priest, a descendant of Aaron, will be with the Levites as they receive these tithes, and 1/10 of all that is collected as the tithes will be delivered by the Levites to the temple of our God and placed in the storerooms. The people and the Levites must bring these offerings of grain, new wine, olive oil to the storerooms and place them in the sacred containers near the ministering priest, the gatekeepers, and the singers. We promise together not to neglect the temple of our God. The leaders of the people were living in Jerusalem, the holy city. 1/10 of the people from the other towns of Judah and Benjamin were chosen by sacred lots to live there, too, while the rest stayed where they were. And the people commended everyone who volunteered to resettle in Jerusalem. And then here's a list of the provincial officials who came to live in Jerusalem. Most of the people, priests, Levites, temple servants, and descendants of Solomon's servants, continued to live in their own homes in various towns of Judah. But some of the people from Judah and Benjamin resettled in Jerusalem. Now we have a big list of them. The other priests, Levites, and the rest of the Israelites lived wherever their family inheritance was located in any of the towns of Judah. The temple servants, however, whose leaders were Ziha and Gispah, all lived on the hill of Ophel. The chief officer of the Levites in Jerusalem was Uzzi, son of Bani, son of Hashabiah, son of Mattaniah, son of Micaiah, a descendant of Asaph, whose family served as singers at God's temple. Their daily responsibilities were carried out according to the terms of a royal command. Pethahiah, son of Meshibel, a descendant of Zerah, son of Judah, was a royal advisor in all matters of public administration. As for the surrounding villages with their open fields, some of the people of Judah lived in Kiriath Arba with its settlements, Dibon with its settlements, Jekabezel with its villages. They also lived in Jeshua, Moladah, Beth Pelet, Hazar Shual, Beersheba with its settlements, Ziklag, and Mechonah with its settlements. They also lived in En-Rimmon, Zorah, Jarmuth, Zenoah, and Adullam with their surrounding villages. They also lived in Lachish with its nearby villages, and Eskah with its surrounding villages. So the people of Judah were living in all the way from Beersheba in the south to the valley of Hinnom. Some of the people of Benjamin lived at Geba, Michmash, Ijah, and Bethel with its settlements. They also lived in Anathoth, Nob, Aniah, Hazor, Ramah, Gittim, Hadid, Zobeim, Nebalat, Lod, Ono, and the Valley of Craftsmen. Some of the Levites who lived in Judah were sent to live with the tribe of Benjamin. And now we get a list of the priests and Levites who returned with Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and Jeshua the high priest. Serahiah, Jeremiah, Ezra, Amariah, Malachum, Hattush, Shechaniah, Harim, Meremoth, Edo, Ginathoth, Abijah, Minamiam, Modiah, Biljah, Shemaiah, Jeriab, Jedaiah, Shalu, Amok, Hilkiah, and Jedediah. These were the leaders of the priests and their associates in the days of Jeshua. The Levites who returned with them were Jeshua, Benui, Kadmiel, Sheriba, Judah, and Mattaniah, who with the associates was in charge of the songs of thanksgiving. Their associates, Bakbukiah and Uni, stood opposite them during the service. All right, we're going to skip over some more of this. A record of the Levite families was kept during the years of Eliashib, Jehoiada, Johanan, and Judua, served as high priests. Another record of the priests was kept during the reign of Darius the Persian. A record of the heads of the Levite families was kept in the book of the history down to the days of Johanan, the grandson of Eliashib. These were the family leaders of the Levites: Hashabiah, Sherebiah, Jeshua, Benanui, Kadmiel, and other associates who stood opposite them during the ceremonies of praise and thanksgiving, one section responding to the other as commanded by David, the man of God. This included Mattaniah, Bakbukiah, and Obadiah. Meshullam, Talmon, and Akub were the gatekeepers in charge of the storerooms at the gates. These all served in the days of Jehoiakim, son of Jeshua, son of Jehozadak, and in the days of Nehemiah the governor and Ezra the priest and scribe. For the dedication of the new wall of Jerusalem, the Levites throughout the land were asked to come to Jerusalem to assist in the ceremonies. They were to take part in the joyous occasions with their songs of thanksgiving and with the music of cymbals, harps, and lyres. The singers were brought together from the region around Jerusalem and the villages of the Netophathites. They also came from Beth Gilgal and the rural areas near Geba and Asmaveth, where the singers had built their own settlements around Jerusalem. The priests and Levites first purified themselves, then they purified the people, the gates, and the wall. I led the leaders of Judah to the top of the wall and organized 2 large choirs to give thanks. One of the choirs proceeded southward along the top of the wall to Dung Gate. Hoshea and the half-leaders of Judah followed them along with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, and Jeremiah. Then came some priests who played trumpets, including Zechariah, son of Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, son of Mattaniah, son of Micaiah, son of Zakur, a descendant of Asaph. And Zechariah's colleagues were Shemaiah, Azariel, Milahiel, Gilaleel, Mai, Nethanel, Judah, and Hanani. They used the musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God. Ezra the scribe led this procession. At the fountain gate they went straight up to the steps of the ascent of the city wall towards the city of David. They passed the house of David and then proceeded to the water gate on the east. The second choir, giving thanks, went northward, around the other way to meet them. I followed them together with the other half of the people, along the top of the wall, past the tower of the ovens to the broad wall, then past the Ephraim gate to the old city gate, past the fish gate and the tower of Haneel, and on to the tower of the 100. Then we continued on to the sheep gate and stopped at the guard gate. The 2 choirs that were giving thanks then proceeded to the temple of God, where they took their places. So did I, together with the group of leaders who were with me. We went together with the trumpet-playing priests, Eliakim, Messiah, Minamiah, Micaiah, Elionai, Zechariah, Hananiah, and the singers, Maaseiah, Shemiah, Eleazar, Uzi, Jehonanan, Malchijah, Eliam, and Ezer. They played and sang loudly under the direction of Jezradiah, the choir director. Many sacrifices were offered on that joyous day, for God had given the people great cause for joy. The women and children also participated in the celebration, and the joy of the people of Jerusalem could be heard far away. On that day, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the offerings, the first part of the harvest, and the tithes. They were responsible to collect from the fields outside the towns the portions required by the law for the priests and Levites. For all the people of Judah took joy in the priests and Levites in their work. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification as commanded by David and his son Solomon, and so did the singers and the gatekeepers. The custom of having choir directors to lead the choirs in hymns of praise and thanksgiving to God began long ago, in the days of David and Asaph. So now, in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah, all Israel brought a daily supply of food for the singers, the gatekeepers, and the Levites. The Levites in turn gave a portion of what they received to the priests, the descendants of Aaron. On that same day, as the book of Moses was being read, the people, the passage was found that said, "No Ammonite or Moabite should ever be permitted to enter the assembly of God, for they had not provided the Israelites with food and water in the wilderness. Instead, they hired Balaam to curse them, though our God turned the curse into a blessing." When this passage of law was read, all those of foreign descent were immediately excluded from the assembly. Before this had happened, Eliashib the priest, who had been appointed as supervisor of the storerooms of the temple of God, and who was also a relative of Tobiah, had converted a large storeroom and placed it at Tobiah's disposal. The room had previously been used for storing the grain offerings, the frankincense, various articles for the temple, and the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil, which were prescribed for the Levites, the singers, and the gatekeepers, as well as the offerings for the priest. I was not in Jerusalem at the time, for I had returned to King Artaxerxes of Babylon in the 32nd year of his reign, though I later asked for his permission to return. When I arrived back in Jerusalem, I learned about Eliashib's evil deed in providing Tobiah with a room in the courtyards of the temple of God. I became very upset and threw all of Tobiah's belongings out of the room. Then I demanded that the rooms be purified, and I brought back the articles for God's temple, the grain offerings, and the frankincense. I also discovered that the Levites had not been given their prescribed portions of food, so they and the singers who were to conduct the worship services had all returned to work their fields. I immediately confronted the leaders and demanded, "Why has the temple of God been neglected?" Then I called all the Levites back again and restored them to their proper duties. And once more all the people of Judah began bringing their tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil to the temple storerooms. I assigned supervisors for the storerooms: Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah, one of the Levites. And I appointed Hanan, son of Zakur, and grandson of Mattaniah, as their assistant. These men had an excellent reputation, and it was their job to make honest distributions to the fellow Levites. Remember this good deed, O my God, and do not forget all that I have faithfully done for the temple of my God and his services. In those days I saw men of Judah treading out their winepresses on the Sabbath. They were also bringing in grain, loading it on donkeys, and bringing their wine, grapes, figs, and all sorts of produce to Jerusalem to sell on the Sabbath. So I rebuked them for selling their produce on that day. Some men from Tyre who lived in Jerusalem were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise. They were selling it on the Sabbath to the people of Judah and in Jerusalem at that. So I confronted the nobles of Judah. "Why are you profaning the Sabbath in this evil way?" I asked. "Wasn't it just this sort of thing that your ancestors did that caused our God to bring all this trouble upon us and our city? Now you are bringing even more wrath upon Israel by permitting the Sabbath to be desecrated in this way." Then I commanded that the gates of Jerusalem should be shut as darkness fell every Friday evening, and not to be opened until the Sabbath ended. I sent some of my own servants to guard the gates so that no merchandise could be brought in on the Sabbath. The merchants and tradesmen with the variety of wares camped outside Jerusalem once or twice, but I spoke sharply to them and said, "What are you doing out here, camping around the wall? If you do this again, I will arrest you." And that was the last time they came on the Sabbath. Then I commanded the Levites to purify themselves and to guard the gates in order to preserve the holiness of the Sabbath. Remember this good deed also, O my God. Have compassion on me according to your great and unfailing love. About that same time, I realized that some of the men of Judah had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Furthermore, half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod or of some other people and could not speak the language of Judah at all. So I confronted them and called down curses on them. I beat some of them and pulled out their hair. I made them swear in the name of the God that they would not let their children intermarry with pagan people of the land. Wasn't this exactly what led King Solomon of Israel into sin? I demanded. There was no king from any nation who could compare to him, and God loved him and made him king over all of Israel. But even he was led into sin by his foreign wives. How could you even think of committing this sinful deed and acting unfaithfully toward God by marrying foreign women? One of the sons of Jehoiada, son of Eliashib, the high priest, had married a daughter of Sanballat the Horonite, so I banished him from my presence. Remember them, O my God, for they have defiled the priesthood and the solemn vows of the priests and the Levites. So I purged out everything foreign and assigned tasks to the priests and Levites, making certain that each knew his work. I also made sure that the supply of wood for the altar and the first portions of the harvest were brought at the proper times. Remember this in my favor, O my God. Okay, and that is where we end the book of Nehemiah today. So, Nehemiah was steadfast in this work. They rebuilt the wall around Jerusalem in 50 something days? He was steadfast. He knew what he wanted to do. He got the wall done. And then would I please read all those parts I skipped? No, I'm not reading the genealogy. You can go back through the list if you would like. Remember, I told you in the past, we're trying to read stories. Genealogy is a list. It's part of the storyline. It's important. But those names are tough enough, all the ones I read. But Nehemiah he was taking none of the stuff from people. He did not accept excuses. He did not cower down when he was being taunted or being accused of false things. I mean, think about that. I don't know if you've ever been accused of something that wasn't true of you, but it can be very discouraging and disheartening. When somebody comes and starts attacking you for what seems like no reason when you're doing something good, you're like, what is going on here? And a lot of times you get distracted from the purpose of what you're trying to do. And it's like, why? Why is this happening to me? And you can become into victim mentality, if you will. But you see none of that from Nehemiah. He is so steadfast. He knows what he's called to do. And here's the other part. Because he understands the history of their own people. He understands the history of people in general. He served under the king of all of Babylon, or I guess it's not Babylon anymore, the Persian Empire with Artaxerxes. I'm sure he's seen the same thing happen, and how you deal with adversity and when people come against you, which is going to happen when you're in a place of authority, it's just natural. It's a natural state that people are going to try to derail you when you do something good. This is the work of the devil, and it often comes through people, and sometimes even through good meaning people, from people who love God sometimes. The devil just does not want you to do the work that God calls you to do. And so you're going to get good meaning people that are even on your side are going to distract you and try to disrupt you from doing the work that you're called to do. It is part of the journey. And you have to know your place and your role. And Nehemiah understood it very well. He understood what he went to do was to rebuild the wall. They rebuilt the wall. Then he's like, now that we've kind of fixed some of the external, right? We put up a little bit of security blanket for us. He's like, now we've got to fix the internal. You got to have some like shield against you, and that's what the wall and the gates were for. And now we got to fix the internal, because the internal he saw was really busted. The people didn't know what to do. They didn't really know the laws, regulations, and commands. And you see this story read out, and we hear this often and often through Scripture, is that they'll retell their story, the history of their people. And when you hear the story read, it's really a great history part, because they read the story of like how God comes through for them at different times, but they also then read the history of how they fail. Okay? And this is where like true history matters. Okay? Know your role and shut your mouth. That's right, Nehemiah, right? He's like, get out of my way. He's just taking none of it from anyone that's giving him lip. He's like, you guys that aren't doing well, like, I mean, look at the end of it. He's like, I'm gonna beat them with rods. I'm gonna basically exile anyone that's not supposed to be here. Like, if you're not on board, get out of the way, because you're gonna find out the wrath of Nehemiah, which seems pretty intense. But you hear them retell this history, okay? And they retell the history of their people through time, all the way from Abraham, all the way down to Moses, and the how God intervenes and gets them out of Egypt from Pharaoh. And then you just see the back and forth, right? The history and how they sin and how they turn to God, but then when things get better, they kind of fall away from God. You just see that, right? In most storylines, when you read history, like if you've gone to school, which if you lived in this country, you probably went to school of some kind, maybe you were homeschooled, but you have to learn the history of America. And generally, the history of America, told by Americans and given by the government as how they want to do it, is told with a very rosy picture of it. The only part that isn't really rosy that is told is about the Civil War. Okay? That part is not rosy. It's impossible to have a rosiness when you have internal struggling. But if you look at all of our other historical things and the wars we do, we tell a pretty good picture, and like we are dominant and we're victorious, right? Like, to tell about some of the bad parts of history and the things that we don't do well, it doesn't inspire the patriotism always. It doesn't inspire like we're the best, which is kind of the mantra that we try to say all the time. Well, we are not much different than any other kingdom. We have good moments, we have bad moments. Okay? Both are important to telling the story so that we don't make, as they say, you learn history so you don't make the same mistakes. And the same thing is happening here with Nehemiah. He's like, guys, he's telling these, they told the story, they read the history back to him. And then he's like, as people start doing things like intermarrying women from other cultures and then having children that don't even speak the language of the thing, he's like, look, you're doing what King Solomon did, which was the pinnacle of our thing. God gave him everything, but because of the intermarrying and all this other stuff, we started this slippery slope of falling away. That's what happens in our kingdom, is that we fall away and we forget to have the steadfast purpose that we're supposed to have. And this is just as prevalent today. It's just as prevalent today. If you don't tell the true history of things, you will forget. And you'll just go on with your pride and everything else and say, well, we're the best and nobody's going to come and conquer us. Well, that's what the Israelites thought. That's what the Judites thought. And we see, looking back, they were conquered. And at some point, if we just live in pride and arrogance in our own self, we're going to have the same problems here. And you don't have to just look at the big kingdom of America. You can look at your state, you can look at your city, you can look at just like the few people that you hang out with, right? The same is true. Like, somebody who's so prideful and arrogant, they just annoy the tar out of you at some point. Because you just don't trust what they say anymore. They're just not truthful because they're not telling both sides of the story. Like, there is some parts that aren't perfect, there are parts that are great, right? And you can just say, well, we're just going to live in the greatness part and we're not going to deal with the parts that are bad. Well, the parts that are bad will creep up because you're going to just let them fester and continue to win. You have to deal with them. And so you have to deal with them in your own lives, right? So, pride and arrogance, they lead us to these places of sin and rebellion and stopping to follow the decrees and regulations that God lays out for us. And Nehemiah is a great example of how you have to be steadfast in this. And as I said before, if you are a leader of any kind of group or any kind of people, and I know some of you are, some of you just in this space here, you have your own streams and your own communities that you get to influence, right? And you're trying to set up communities. That is great. But you have to be steadfast in how you do that, right? If you just let trolls come in and say nasty things to others, or let that abide without like giving some context to it, then it's gonna just take over and make things bad for the community you're trying to set up. So you have a role and a responsibility with whatever group you are, okay? And you probably have roles and responsibilities, whether it's in your work, whether it's in your family, that if you just let if you let people just come in and start telling falsehoods to others, then that's going to run rampant. And you don't want that, okay? So, as an example, live it out faithfully in yourself, be truthful, and then allow that to then help others learn to live truthful as well. Okay? Yeah. I mean, self-preservation is often the place where we get into a lot of trouble. When we're just trying to make sure that we survive and we put up this front that everything is perfect, like, you can't keep it up. You're trying to live out a lie. Live out the truth, okay? Live out the truth in your life. Speak the truth. Tell both the good and the bad, you know? I mean, I had a tough day yesterday. Real tough day yesterday. My family went through a lot of stuff, and you know, like, it's not perfect in my house. I have 6 children. Like, things happen, right? And it's okay to be honest, and it's okay to be vulnerable, right? Because then you're saying, look, in a community, we have to sometimes be honest and vulnerable in the things that are tough, right? And I've always hoped that people could be honest here. You know, I remember when Asibla was struggling because her dad was really in a tough space, right? Like, and Eric's been through some of those, like, and I'm going through it a little bit with some family stuff, right? You know, my mother-in-law passed away this year. Like, life happens. There's going to be difficult times, and we need our communities to rally around us. but we have to be open and honest with those things. Um, and that's how we become stronger internally, right? So we build a little wall around us to help outside trolls not come in. And yes, we troll each other a little because we love each other, but we don't want to take it too far either, right? We have to know where the lines are. Um, you know, and if somebody asks for some space from that, we honor the boundaries that they want, right? So yes, Eric and I, we control each other because we're okay with it. We know it's in good humor and it helps. But Wicked's not here to defend himself. I'm not going to speak about Wicked and his desire his desire for quailing from me. Okay. Um, you know, each of us get to deal with it. But if he starts doing that to somebody else, I'm going to punish him. I'm gonna give him timeouts. Uh, okay. And it's hard. It's hard to make these tough choices because you're trying to build a community. Okay, in Discord or in Twitch or in real life in all the different organizations and communities you're part of. It's hard. It's hard to keep people together. People get their feelings hurt. I mean, it's just part of life. It's part of life. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is build a community that is for each other, that helps each other, supports each other. Okay, and you see that in this story here. Okay, and you see these rules and regulations that they put in place. They were supposed to have special people to have certain roles, right? That's what these Levites are. They are people set apart for special roles to not have to work the fields, but to take care of some of the other things, Temple of God, to make sure that the rules and regulations, requirements of God are being carried out on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a community around you that supports you in doing these things. And in this case, like financially supports you. So you see this interdependency on one another. And a good community depends on one another. And so in that journey, we have to create a space where we look after one another and we care for one another. And so that's my hope with the community I set up. I hope that those who have influence and in communities they set up do the same, is that they create communities where people support one another, because that's what we all want in life. We want communities that support one another and care for one another. So if you're not part of one of those groups, or you see you could see it in other groups sometimes that maybe you're not really part of. You're like, wow, that group's really kind of nasty, or they're about bullying people, and it's like, it's kind of hard to be a participant in that. So, you can, but I don't recommend it. Thanks, Cecilia. Yeah, my eldest son, he has something going on. He's gonna hopefully go to the doctor. He might have to have some surgery. So, just things happen in life. You're not always prepared for it. You're not ready for it. Wasn't expecting it, and now we have to deal with it. So, but it's okay. Life happens. We have to kind of just continue to journey on, and get the help we need. And as I said, if you tell me medical things, it's like talking Swahili to me. I've got nothing. I don't know. You're going to be talking a foreign language, and I got no clue what's happening when they talk about medical things. So In fact, I'm really bad with medical things. In general, I pass out a lot when they even start talking about medical things. So like I'm so useless when it comes to these things. Um, I'm gonna have to be the person that stays behind and takes care of the kids. Because I'm just not good with it. We have our limitations. Like we have our limitations. I pass out all the time when I get a shot. Um, and uh, like I passed out when my wife had her wisdom teeth pulled out. Okay, like when they were trying to tell me how to care for her. Like I'm terrible with these things. It just uh, you know, just don't put me in a medical profession. It ain't gonna work. Okay, know your lane, as we said, and you stick to it sometimes, and let others stick to their lanes. Right? They're the Levites that need to work on these things. Okay. Anyways, way off track there, but that's just being real. I'm not perfect. I've got weaknesses. I've got places that I need others to help me with in those journeys, and we all do, right? To just put down our pride and say, "Hey, I need help." It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to seek help if we need mental help. It's okay to seek help in lots of places, but we need a group around us that's encouraging us to become the best versions of ourselves, and to have leaders that are steadfast in that, like Nehemiah. We don't see that often. We don't see that often. And we might not even be used to that. We don't really have a society like that because our society looks more like how the people of Israel were in the days of the judges, when everyone did whatever they thought was right in their own eye. And so when everyone does whatever's right in their own eye, people do all kinds of things, right? And so at the end of the day, all you can do is find groups of people that you find commonality with and say, all right, we're gonna abide by these principles and precepts and concepts. And I hope that that's a group that brings life to you, brings hope to you, brings encouragement to you, and challenges you to become the best version of yourself. So find places like that and stick with them and encourage them and be part of that journey. Okay, enough said. It was a good book. The book of Nehemiah, such a good book. As I said, this book has a lot of special meaning to me in a season of my life. I read this book and it gave me a lot of wisdom of what I had to go through, and what I was being invited to be part of. And it kind of just lays out a good blueprint of how to start something, how to set a task up, how to find people to be with you, and to say, look, we're going to do this together. We're going to be part of something that's bigger than us. We're going to first fix a wall, and then internally, we're going to go after some things to make it better. And look, everyone has internal issues just as well. I wish nobody did, but we all do. We all have things that we need to work on in our lives. And this book just gives us hope that we can fix these things and make them better, put and restore order in our own internal world. And so, be steadfast about it. Be steadfast about making your internal world better. Okay, thanks for being here today. We're going to start a new book on Friday, and it is a beautiful book. We'll probably read the entirety of it. It's a story about a girl, and it is a very, very beautiful story. So there's about 4 main characters in it, but it is a great story. Again, most good stories we tell, and we see this in Nehemiah, we see this through these stories here, and it's good to learn these stories. Like they have conflict, in them. Without some conflict, without some opposition, the story is kind of boring. And so you have to have somebody who kind of doesn't want what you want as an opposition for a story to really matter. Okay? And so think about that with the story of your own life. There is somebody out there that doesn't want you to succeed or to become better. And figure out who that is, and then it's not always a person. I'm going to give you a little spoiler. It's not always a person, but there's something, spirits out there that don't want you to become the best version of yourself. God wants you to become the best version of yourself. I want you to become the best version of yourself. But there are things that are going to try to stop you from that. And so that's what makes our stories all the better, is that we overcome the obstacles that are thrown our way and against the things that are set up against us. And we're going to see that again in this story that we read starting on Friday. I think we'll read the whole thing, maybe. I don't know how long it is off the top of my head, but it's such a beautiful story. And so make sure you guys are here Friday. Okay? I will be back with you Wednesday for some poker on Wednesday evening. And until then, have a great couple days. And I will see you guys again soon. Thanks for being here. Love you all.